All right, we're on. Let's go. Uh, Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the OoruLabs podcast, Talking Heads, the soapbox for urban sustainability. Today we're going to be talking about the electric bus revolution. Is there an e-bus revolution in India? Myself, I am Sathya Sankaran, joined by Knerav, and our guest today to walk us through the whole e-bus story and give us a better perspective of that is Ravi Gadepalli. Ravi has done a lot of work around the bus, and in fact, he's even done some bus around what is work around what is called intermediate paratransit, which is basically your auto rickshaw and other shared modes. I'll put a link to his work and his profile in the show notes, but he's got excellent experience around. He works with the World Bank and the ADB as a consultant and with UITP as well. It's a lot of experience. Thanks for talking to us, Ravi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sathya. My pleasure. Thanks for the kind introduction.
Hey, no problem at all. Look, we have been, myself and Nirav have been watching a lot of buses on the road suddenly in trying to understand where public transport is going. There are a lot more e-buses on the road, Ravi. Where did they come from? Where did all these new e-buses come from? The violet ones, the blue ones I see in my city and everywhere else. Where did they come from?
Yeah, they just didn't come by chance. There was a lot of years of effort by several people at various levels of government to reach where we are here. And interestingly, a lot of this work happened over the past 4 or 5 years. So we made significant progress in India, particularly on electric buses recently. Where did they come from? The inception of the idea, I think, started back in 2017 or so when the FAME scheme of Government of India, which is the faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid in brackets and electric vehicles, which they've intentionally written like that hybrid we are evaluating, but electric is what we actually want. So, so as a part of the FAME scheme, Government of India identified that we need electric mobility in general in India to reduce fossil fuel dependence and also improve the air quality across cities in India. And within that, it was identified that buses should be a key priority. So out of the 10,000 crores or so that FAME scheme had, around 3,500 crores were allocated for buses. So that is in the FAME 2 actually. So the first phase of FAME was a pilot. We wanted to just figure out what it is all about. So there were about 390 buses or so which were eligible for subsidy, and we saw that only about 230 buses were implemented through the scheme, and that is across India. So it was not a very large scale pilot, and even the buses which were procured, the performance varied significantly. One, the quoted cost varied significantly, and then the performance also was not so great. So it was not very clear what exactly was happening. So there was some rethink, and the second round of FAME, which, like I said, has a 10,000 crore mandate and 3,500 crores for buses. So that had a more refined structure where they said that we'll standardize the procurement document at a national level and ask cities to use that document so that it is not because of varying procurement needs that we get different costs. And the products were also standardized to some extent. Some basic specifications were given, but I would not say it was not very clear actually on the product specification in the first round of FAME. Even then, I mean, it was a significant jump from the FAME 1 scheme where around India, around 3,600 buses were procured, or I mean, the tendering was finalized. And then COVID happened, and so several cities did not even go ahead with the contract signing. So we discovered the prices, but we didn't really discover the bus on the road because of COVID and the city's financial scenario. They didn't really want to get into a new technology and take a risk with public resources, which were quite limited at that time. But then the price discovery showed that even despite a standardized concession agreement, there was significant variation in cost between cities. So the next round, what government of India did is to actually concentrate the electric bus deployment in the top metropolitan cities in India, which actually simultaneously solved a few problems together. The first thing is to have economies of scale, where you have large volume of buses in limited number of cities. That means that your power infrastructure, charging infrastructure, all of that you can
It's more
actually
concentrated.
optimize for a larger fleet size.
Mm,
Second, these the larger cities also have better financial strength. So what we realized at that time was that the quote between different cities varied, also because of the risk premium involved in going for a given city. Let's say city A, city B, so the financial strength of the city is not so great, which means that the operator who is bidding for the project may not be actually getting paid on time. So
mm,
they take that as a risk premium and quote higher. So because of this, the same kind of bus, let's say 9-meter bus or a 12-meter bus, was costing 40 to 50% different between different cities. So I mean, how can the same service cost different in different cities? That is because of the city's financial strength as one risk. The second thing is procurement specifications. So when the 3,600 buses happened, different cities tweaked with the model concession agreement that the government of India provided. So some cities changed the termination clause, somebody changed the payment timeline, someone else changed the penalties. So there are several things to change actually. I mean there are as many as we analyzed tenders, and there are as many as 48 variables on a in a given electric bus tender.
mm,
Even for that matter, Bangalore, where
mm,
we are all sitting in. So
mm.
the out of those 3,600, Bangalore was allocated some 300 buses, and there were 5 rounds of tendering before the rate got finalized.
We are talking about
Uh,
the FAME 1 or under the FAME 2 one?
no, no, FAME 1, Bangalore actually cancelled the tender. So in FAME
Oh
1,
yeah, we don't have
even
any.
in
We didn't
FAME
get
1,
any.
Bangalore got the cheapest rate in India. But
Mm,
at that time, okay, I hate to mention one more innovation that happened through electric buses. All these years, the bigger state transport undertakings have been owning buses and operating them on their own by
mm,
recruiting drivers, conductors, and mechanics on in-house. Whereas with electric buses, Government of India promoted the gross cost contract model. So, which the model was there even before in India, where the bus is purchased by a private operator. The driver
mm,
and mechanics are all hired by the private operator.
mm,
They provide the service and get paid on a per kilometer basis. So
mm,
that way, the operator has to deliver the service and get paid for the service delivered, and
mm,
the revenue risk is still taken by the city. So if you have subsidized tariff, or if you want to provide off-peak services or rural services which are not profitable for a private operator, they still have to do it because they're just getting paid on a per kilometer basis, and the city provides a service level it desires to provide. So with diesel buses, some cities, the cities which chose GCC based gross cost contract procurement were the ones which did not have strong in-house expertise. With electric buses, there was more push towards gross cost contract, because of several reasons. One is that the technology itself is new, and cities are not sure how this will perform. Will it perform for 10 years, or will it just explode on the road? We don't even know. So the technology risk is put on the private operator, and they have to make sure the bus works for 10 years, 12 years, and they get paid for the service delivered. And the capital expenditure is also taken by the private operator. So they raise the capital instead of a government. So you assume that private capital is more efficient, and so large scale procurement can happen within limited space by attracting private capital into the space. So
right.
that was the assumption.
So I want to come back to the GCC model because it's
Mm.
a very interesting innovation. I feel
Mm.
is it brings the strength of the private. Yet there are
Mm.
different a couple of different models that you've talked about.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to go back to the story of this procurement of the buses through the government of India. So which entity in the government of India is actually funding this? And I heard CESL was involved. Whatever the okay, explain to me what is CESL and why is that in the middle of all these things?
yeah. So like I was mentioning earlier, instead of focusing on several cities, government decided to focus on the top 9 metropolitan cities, And
Mm,
within top nine also, it's not a handing or a gift that okay you take this money, but there's something called as a grand challenge where within these nine cities also there was a challenge on the city actually coming up to the expected benchmark and being part of the program.
mm,
Technically, all of them could have qualified. Like we have the smart cities mission, all 100 cities are now qualified as smart cities, but they had to take up some measures to reach there. So they took some time, but eventually they were all there. So to do that, to encourage cities to agree to the best case scenario, so government appointed this nodal agency called CESL, the Convergence Energy Services Limited, which is a subsidiary of the Energy Efficiency Services Limited,
okay.
EESL. ESL has been doing this aggregated procurement for other appliances over a period of time, whether it is street lights or I mean,
LED
they have
lights
done
and
several. Yeah, so the LED is the more popular one, and I think that was their claim to fame. And then they expanded into several other solar pump sets and so many other things. So because they have this experience of aggregating and then procuring as per Government of India norms, which are very
mm,
transparent and the best of the class in India. So they have appointed CSL to run the challenge. And Ms. Mahua Acharya, who was the CEO of CSL at that time, until recently she was the CEO. So she is a
mm,
very enterprising and dynamic person who actually engaged with all the cities. The
mm.
subsidy was coming from Department of Heavy Industries or the Ministry of Heavy Industries of Government of India.
Okay,
So
okay.
they were giving over the money, but through CESL. So CSL is playing the role of an aggregator. So and what they do is to collect demand from several cities and put it out there as one big tender. So what
Mm.
they did was they got a demand as much as 5,500 buses just with five cities. So which were
Wow.
Delhi, Bangalore, um, Surat, Kolkata, and Hyderabad.
Mm,
So these were the five
mm,
cities out of the nine metropolitan cities. The other four did not participate. Chennai,
mm,
Mumbai, Surat, and Ahmedabad did not participate even though they were qualified. So because of several local reasons. So
mm,
Mumbai wanted to go ahead with their own local procurement, which was for some reason they thought it is faster. And then in Chennai, they were not even ready for electric buses because of other infrastructure or other reasons.
mm, mm. No, but I
Same, I
thought
mean, each
yesterday.
city has a story on why they don't want to go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, no, yesterday I thought there was something about Chennai with World Bank funding going for a GCC model without on a complete lease. Anyway, we'll get to that. I think there was
Yeah,
something, I
that is
don't know what
now.
was it.
That is in
That is
2023.
now.
So this discussion
This
is
was
in
long ago.
2021. I'm talking about. So 2 years
Okay,
back,
okay.
they were not as keen to go with the national level procurement.
Mm,
So I mean, even now Chennai is keen to do their own thing at their own city level, which is fair actually. I mean, at the end of the day, bus operations is heavily local, and
mm.
you need to be really confident about the model to get into it because it's a 12-year commitment to get into a contract. So whatever the city feels is best for them should be. I mean, it should be allowed for cities to do that. Yeah.
But Ravi, was there any advantage of participating in this centralized procurement model for the cities? Was there any extra help they got? I mean, technical help they did get in standardizing procurement, evaluation, getting all these monies done. But was there any other advantage? Like, did they get a subsidy on some things just because they got this? Did they get a better rate
Correct.
on their things?
Yeah, so at the beginning we didn't know what was the outcome of the tender going to be. The first reason for cities to participate is that only then you'll get fame subsidy. It's as simple as that. So fame subsidy which was
Okay.
directly given to the city is now routed through CESL and only if you participate there you'll get fame subsidy. That is the primary reason for cities' interest in the thing. But as we went to the through the procurement process, several things actually cities realized that there were several other benefits that were coming through. So the first benefit was the standardization of the procurement norms. Like I was saying earlier, every city tried to innovate and change a few things here and there based on what they thought was best. So here you have five cities, the five best cities in India, sitting together and deciding one big tender, where the collective intelligence of all the cities came together and we defined the best specs for India. And it was not a specs for Bangalore, specs for Delhi kind of thing. It's a best specs for India. So in that process, the cities which had limited bargaining power at their own level. So the city talking to OEM for 300 buses, versus government of India talking to OEM for 5,000 buses, it's a totally different game altogether. So through that, they were able to drive a lot of best in class specifications for buses, like the battery warranty for the entire lifetime, the powertrain, the traction motor, the critical components, the warranty period extended, and all the Make in India specifications were also very strong to have a strong local manufacturing requirement, which the cities on their own would not be able to push because it's a national level mandate. So that's the first benefit they got. The second benefit was the price itself. So because of the volume, there was a rush of all the bidders coming together. In the previous tenders, we saw in several cities that there were not more than two or three bidders in many cases. In many cities, there was just one bidder participating. I mean, the Bangalore tender I was talking about with 300 buses, that even though it went through 5 rounds of cancellation before finalizing, it succeeded in getting five bidders to participate and achieved the lowest rate at that time before this aggregation business started. So Bangalore got the lowest rate at that time because they offered a slightly higher subsidy, but more importantly, they refined the tender document such that you have the maximum participation, and
Excellent.
that actually started as a reference for the national level one, and there were many more improvements done on the bankability, on the termination clause, on several other items where it was neither, I mean, it was a balanced agreement between the city and the operator. And so because of the higher competition that the national level procurement attracted, we also got lower rates than what the cities would get on their own, but more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, lower than the diesel or the CNG rates also, diesel or CNG bus
Mm-hmm.
rates. Not just a marginally lower rate, it's actually 25 to 30% lower than the diesel. So then everybody woke up suddenly that, oh, now we are ready for electric buses because it is much cheaper and on a very strong procurement norm. I mean, if you make a procurement norms easy and get a lower cost, that is expected. But if you have a strong procurement norms and a lower cost, now people realize that it is here to stay. Yeah.
So this is approximately Ravi, around 6,500 buses you said, right? That's the total that
So
got
the
deployed. That's right.
5,545 to be precise, that
Oh,
was
sorry,
the
5,000.
volume
Okay.
for which the tender happened. But
Mm.
out of that, the subsidy was available only for 3,700 buses. So for the remaining buses, the cities were supposed to come to the table with their own subsidy for the remaining buses, which some cities did, some didn't. So eventually, some 4,000 plus buses are actually contracted out. The rest were not contracted out. So
Mm.
4,000, you
So
can
that
assume 4,000. Yeah.
yeah. Well, after all the effort, we got around 4,000 buses, which is a significant number. I even heard
Yeah.
that BMTC couldn't cough up the money, and they left 300 buses on the table, which they couldn't take out of the thousand, whatever, 300, 400. They could
579
only.
buses.
Yeah, so I think, oh, so that many is what they had to leave on the
Yeah.
table,
So
right? They ended up with
BMTC asked for
920,
1,500 and 921 buses were subsidized by
921
government.
buses were subsidized. Yeah. Now, so that brings up an
That's a lot.
interesting question. Now, the way I want to approach that question is, what is the total market for? Is that how many buses do we have, and are we going to replace everything with e-vehicles? That's the question I want to ask. Is that what it is? How big is this? How big is this? Because I read somewhere that uh, maybe India can take 50, 60,000 buses. Is that what it is? Is that the number you think? Is that a reasonable number?
See numbers. So before getting into the actual number, what we need to understand is the problem scale itself. So when we
Mm.
say electric buses, all the focus is on the prefix electric, electric, electric. But the focus
Yes.
should be on the bus, and only the technology is electric. There are some variations for electric technology, like you need to provide a charger, take care of range constraints. You need to have the infrastructure. You need to have the right scheduling mechanism. All of that needs to come in, which is now a known problem. But what is still unknown is how do we sustain buses in our cities? To me, that is the bigger question, or that for the sector itself, that's a bigger question. So, the number of buses we have in India are about 1.5 million, and if you ask the same question back in 2013 also, I would have said number of buses in India was 1.5 million. So the 1.5 million includes public buses, private buses, urban buses, intercity, rural, everything put together. Okay, on one hand, we are seeing population increasing, the private vehicles increasing, economy growing, which means the travel demand grows. But buses have been at the same place over so many years. And within 1.5 million, only 10% are public buses. 90% are privately owned and operated buses, which are either long distance intercity buses or these corporate office transport buses, school buses. School buses are actually the maximum share, I believe.
I think
So
so.
that is actually a reflection of how bad the public transport is. If there is good public transport, why would everybody have to send their children in a school bus? So, right?
Yeah,
So in some,
yeah.
so so the real question is how many buses does India need, and what technology choice should we take for that? So just the public buses itself, there are estimates that right now we have about 150,000 public transport buses, 1.5 lakh buses. That there is a need for 3 lakh more buses just in the public transport space. So you pick up
Mm,
any one state and you'll have the same story again and again repeated. That the bus
mm,
fleet size has been just stagnant or declining, and if the traffic increases, fleet number remains the same, which means that the kilometers operated by the bus is even lower, which means that the actual service delivered to citizens is actually reducing over several years, despite the travel increase and more demand and all of that. So, so one is the number of buses needed in India itself. So that itself should quadruple or even grow to a much larger extent. So within this 1.5 lakh public buses, there are estimates that about 50,000 of them are in urban operating conditions, which are,
mm,
if you take the top metropolitan cities, Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, so these together make up about 25-30,000 of these 50,000 buses. So, so the scale is concentrated. So you can say that, oh, I want to electrify 100%. Yeah, of course you can do that because now the technology is ready. I mean, there is a legacy fleet and they have a age, and you need many more buses. So the problem is to not replace the existing fleet. The problem is to augment the overall fleet, and the augmentation should definitely be 100% electric in urban conditions from now on. So that is not even a point for debate. I mean, there's a point for debate on a
yeah.
local level due to
Mm,
politics or local
mm,
constraints with electrical infrastructure or something. But as a technology, the technology is ready for us to take it up as a 100% choice from now on for urban conditions.
right.
For
So,
just one last point on the
ah,
long distance condition, the technology is still evolving. It's not ready because we haven't asked for it. In urban, there is 3-4 rounds of procurement and a lot of effort put together. So what people say is to expand the range of the bus is only adding more battery capacity, which is not a technologically very complicated challenge. Once the bus is ready, adding battery capacity is not that complicated. That's what the OEM say. So, yeah,
mm. No, I mean, you
Ravi,
can
actually
always.
speaking about the technology of the bus,
yeah.
you spoke to them evaluating hybrid buses initially. So just looking at the drive of the bus, is it going to be pure electric moving forward? Is it going to be a hybrid model, or maybe even hydrogen buses? So how are all of these authorities evaluating which buses to choose?
Mm,
And could you speak on that decision?
mm. See, government of India has tactically avoided the hybrid technology because hybrid bus or any hybrid vehicle which is hybrid between electric and the internal combustion engine combination will only deliver a marginal efficiency improvement, but it will still give you the same ill effects of a fossil fuel vehicle where you are using fossil fuel. The maintenance needs are more, and you need to maintain two separate technologies. It's more when it is seen more as a headache, at least for a bus operator point of view. I'm not an expert in every other technology or every other vehicle type, but at least for buses. So hybrid between diesel electric hybrid or CNG electric hybrid are just not even a thing to consider anymore. Now that the electric is so, I mean, competitive, price competitive. So that I would definitely rule out. It's not even a thing to think or make a scenario about. What is the real question is now about the hydrogen vehicle technology and the fuel technology also. So first is the technology readiness, and second is it the best choice for us to take or not? So on that there are several question marks yet. So firstly, uh, the amount of hydrogen. So, firstly, there is enough research outside India that hydrogen should be preferred for hard to electrify sectors, and not the sectors where electrification is feasible. Like, for example, in urban conditions, battery electric buses will continue to be the better technology even in the future when the hydrogen becomes available. Second, the hydrogen capacity in India or wherever is that there is need for hydrogen in other sectors also, where there is uh, I mean, there are several types of hydrogen: green, blue, and gray. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, but broadly, there is a fossil fuel based hydrogen and then solar based or green hydrogen being generated. So, there is enough demand for green hydrogen in the industry sector, in fertilizer development,
Yeah.
and other places. So, after all of that, and that is more commercially lucrative than public transport always. If I'm a hydrogen supplier, I'd rather sell it to a fertilizer manufacturer than to 150,000 buses across India, right? So it is likely that the space available for buses for within hydrogen ecosystem will be limited. So for now, we should not distract ourselves towards hydrogen technology. And second, the vehicle models are yet not there. I mean, right now only a few are being piloted. For them to reach commercial scale, like I said, with electric buses, it took 5 years of consistent effort at a national level, city level, to reach where we are here. And 5 years back also we had good vehicle models available. In hydrogen, we still don't even have a commercial product available. And then the fuel itself is still being developed. For it to reach commercial scale and then to reach a commercial market level commercial scale is a few years away. So until at least the next 5 years, we should single-mindedly focus on electric buses and how to make them feasible, I think.
Got it. Thanks
Correct.
for that. And actually, I had another question regarding speaking back to your point on private operators.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there was a certain sort of set of metrics that each, let's just say, state authority looks at when evaluating a private operator. Could you speak on that? Because that's something that I've wondered for quite some time as to why a particular operator was chosen and how they're evaluated, if there is any choice at all in the matter,
Hmm.
also.
Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting question. So, first is to evaluate the private operator at the time of bidding, and then to make sure, and then keep evaluating them throughout the contract to make sure they're actually delivering on the project that they've committed to. There are two separate questions. So, first on the evaluation for the at the bidding stage is slightly more evolved and straightforward now, not 3 years back. So in some countries they have something called as QCBS, quality cum cost based selection, and in India, because of our transparency acts, we have something called as L1, the least cost bidder will be chosen. But just because it is least cost, you can't allow anybody. So what the process followed is that first you call for expression of interest, where you ask for the vehicle specifications and the bidder qualifications, like what is your background, manufacturing capability, etc. So through that process, you first qualify some vehicle manufacturers to participate. Then you have the actual tendering process, where there are two types of evaluation built into the same thing. So there is a eligibility criteria, where you have the technological eligibility in terms of your bus capacity, manufacturing capacity, all the specs needed, and also the financial capability. If someone is delivering 1,000 buses and operating them over a period of time, do they have the background turnover to actually manage such a large system? There is a working capital, upfront capital investment needed. Can they raise finance? All of that is quite important. So, so that is the eligibility criteria. After which you shortlist some of the bidders, and then you choose the one which has quoted the least cost. And then the vehicle specs are already there. So whoever participates, they may have a slightly different type of bus, but there is a minimum qualification criteria that you need a gradability of 17%. Your glass thickness should be something. So there are all these detailed specs which they need to uh, follow. So only after that you get eligible and you get selected. That is the evaluation until the selection. And that too, you first have L1, and out of the total bid volume, you if the L2, and you don't want to hand over all the contract to a single bidder, and then tomorrow if the bidder fails, the city fails, right? So to avoid that situation, so around 30% of the volume is eligible to be given to the L2 or L3 bidder, subject to them matching the L1 price. So let's say Tata Motors and Ashok Leyland are L1 and L2. One of them has quoted slightly lower, they get selected as L1. And if the L2 one is agreeable to match the same cost, 30% of the demand, I mean, it's up to the city, it can be 40%, 50%. It won't be 50% because then you are killing the competition. So, but at least 70 30, 60 40, that kind of split is made so that the L2 bidder is also having some demand. And so we have a couple of manufacturers in the system. That is until the bidding selection stage. After that, there are key performance indicators clearly written. There's something called as a SLA, Service Level Agreement,
Agreements.
which has all these key performance indicators, which include things like operational KPIs. Are you punctual or not? Are you delivering the kilometers promised? There are these actual performance, physical performance indicators. There are some like cleanliness and other qualitative performance aspects. And then there are financial performance aspects also. And there is a penalty. If you don't perform at a given level, there is a penalty which is now capped at 10% in the contract. But if you are breaching that 10% over a consistent period, let's say 3 months or 6 months, you are eligible for termination for the contract. So you
I
can
see.
even get terminated if you don't perform. So that's as per the contract. But as a city, suppose you have, after all this pain, you selected a bidder, and 1 year, 2 year down the line, if they're not performing as required, you can't just terminate and get into a new tender because it's a long process to get more buses on the street. So it's a bit of a so it is a marriage. Whether you make it a happy marriage or a forced marriage, that's up to the city and the bidder and the partnership between them, really. So
There will be ups and downs, just like any other
yeah.
marriage. But the question is now, we've put a lot of effort into trying to find the best guy who can perform and who doesn't go down financially and all that,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But
mm,
one of the reasons is like Fame 2 subsidies were there, they bought it, and then when you had 500 more buses, you can't buy it because you don't have any money.
mm,
The public utilities, the public bus companies which are running our urban bus systems, they are actually buying these assets, right? And then so we'll come back to the model again and see there
mm,
is a way in which you buy the assets, own the assets, and just uh, take over the revenue risk and ask them to give them some amount of money and say just run the buses. And then the other way that you're saying is that the operators themselves own the buses and run the buses, and you still take the revenue risk. That is the whole definition of the gross cost, right?
mm, mm,
As opposed to just giving it all away. You are able to
mm,
control the price. The public bus company is able to control the prices
mm.
for the public and still be able to leverage the advantage of private people participating in this in a certain way. So that sounds like a good model. Two questions: if the public bus company is buying the buses, like they are, some of them are like the new model in which Chennai is saying that no, 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 I don't even want to buy the buses, you only buy and operate, like you're mentioning. The other model is that bus company owns the buses but only puts them out for running. In the case of the bus company owning the buses, do you think that is a good model? It may or may not take some risks, you can talk, it may avoid some risks, you can tell us about that. But in case they are buying the buses, do they actually have the money to buy the buses? Because if people are leaving the buses on the table like this because they don't want to procure, who would leave a good offer on the table just because they didn't have the money? So if they don't have the money for 500, do you think they are going to buy double their fleet with electric buses in the future? What do you have to say to that? How do we deal with this?
So the first thing is whether it is government or private or whoever it is, somebody is spending money to get the bus and the driver and conductor. Okay. So
Hmm.
there is financing involved, whether it is public financing or private financing, which gets paid over the contract period. That varies between the two models, but there is money flow involved, and so that is the key challenge going forward. Actually, so until now, so what the progress we made is we know how exactly to go about inducting buses on what technical specs, financial specs needed. But going forward, like you said, to scale up to 50,000 to meet the current needs, or to go to 3 lakhs or 5 lakhs to meet the actual demand. So there's a massive investment required in the sector in general. So how to get public transport up to a level where we get the investments, whether it is private or public, is a secondary thing. So that is where the crucial governance or the financing reforms needed are. That right now, public buses. I mean, if I can take a couple of minutes, because this is the crux of the problem going forward. So I'll take a couple of minutes to explain the context in which we are operating.
Hmm.
So, the public bus corporations in India fall under the Road Transport Corporations Act, which was written back in 1960. And if you see the Road Transport Corporations Act, it says that there is a central share and a state share in setting up a road transport corporation or a state transport undertaking, like DTC, BMTC, MTC, all these corporations. And now there are city level corporations also. They fall also under this. And at that time, capital was the key challenge and not the operating cost. The drivers and conductors' salaries were not so high, relatively, compared to the capital cost. As well, maybe as independent India, we didn't have capital. Even now, we don't have capital for a lot of things. Then it must have been worse. So, what the Act provisions for is that there is a central and state contribution for capital, and the operating cost is supposed to be recovered from the fares. And that was enough at that time. And actually, a lot of RTCs or STUs were making profits until a decade back or even 15 years back. But over a period of time, the staff costs grew, the fuel costs also grew. But then you can't keep charging people as per your cost increase, because people who are using public transport are typically the ones who can't afford other modes. So after a point, you lose demand. So people are, you call it a political decision, but political means it's for the masses. So broadly, cities or states realize that you can't price after a point. So there is a gap between the cost of providing the service and the revenue you collect. So that has to be paid by someone, right? So there is a loss in the system that has to be absorbed by someone. But because our RTC Act is not written for this scenario, there's no legal provisioning for this. So, and then it becomes a discretionary spending by the cities or states, whoever. So in some of the cities which are serious about public transport, like Delhi, Chennai, Bangalore, Mumbai, there is a implicit understanding that you will get paid for the losses. And in some of the cities where there is not enough support for public transport, the STUs or RTCs have slowly dropped. And even in the cities where they are receiving support, they are just receiving enough to stay afloat. They are
Hmm.
not but they are still unable to grow and meet the actual travel demand requirements.
Hmm.
So in this context, if we have to go electric, which is capital intensive, the thing between diesel and electric also is that in diesel you spend less upfront and pay more over a period of time, whereas for electric you need upfront capital. So
How much more
when
costlier
the
is it?
capital
Two times more, I think. Twice as expensive.
for equivalent bus, if you are talking about a low floor AC electric bus like a Volvo bus, we have in Bangalore buses a similar quality bus. Electric, it is some 1.8 to 2 times more expensive. But what we have in our cities are not Volvo standard buses. What we have is a very basic tin box versus a slightly sophisticated bus. Which, I mean, it is likely that our OEMs eventually deliver a twin box with electric battery also. But at least the initial electric buses which are coming are slightly better quality buses. So in that scenario, so you are upgrading the service quality also. So that there is a cost to that. So if you look at that cost, the non-AC diesel bus, which is the norm currently, is 45 lakhs for a BS6 bus, whereas the electric bus is now 1.5 to 1.6 crores for a 12-meter standard size bus. So there is substantial capital increase, but despite the fourfold increase in cost, you will recover that within 4 5 years because of the lower cost of operating electric buses. First, the electricity cost per kilometer, you spend only 7 8 rupees on electricity in a Bangalore type situation, whereas for diesel buses you spend 25 rupees or so. So there is a substantial saving you make over operations. So you recover over a period of time. And the electricity prices are also stable. They are locally available electricity, whereas the diesel bus, we always know it keeps increasing at 4%.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, no, no. That thing we are anyway going away from, right? So that's the
yeah,
question
correct.
Nira was
So
asking is, yeah.
yeah, but again, coming back to the financial viability, so there needs to be a legal reform or a
Policy.
institutional mandate to take care of the overall losses that a public bus agency makes. So only then you will be able to attract capital. So and then the second question is whether that should be public capital or private capital. To take care of the viability gap funding, there needs to be clear mandate. In an ideal world, we need to amend the RTC Act itself, and then it will trickle down to each and every state. But at least each state on its own, like for example, World Bank is supporting Chennai to constitute something called as a public transport service contract, and that is
Mm-hmm.
a kind of mandate that several European cities also have. In Europe, there is a legislation called public transport service obligation, where
Mm,
the city is obligated to provide a minimum level of service, and in lieu of the service provided, they get compensated for the
mm,
viability gap funding. So we don't have that legislative change in India because that's a national level thing. But at least Chennai at a city level, they are issuing a public transport service contract between the Tamil Nadu government and MTC, the local bus operator,
right,
saying
right.
that as long as you meet these performance criteria, you operate so many kilometers at a punctuality and whatever, and at a certain level of occupancy, then you are eligible to get funded for the viability gap. So that is
So,
an institutional thing. Yeah, go ahead, please.
so that no, but that was an interesting thing I wanted to pick on because the World Bank is funding the viability on the operational expense, and the operator is owning and bringing that to the table. In which case, the corporation, the transport corporation doesn't really own the assets, but they still get the benefit of a well structured public service obligation, public transport
Yeah,
service
so
obligation.
I'll come to the who owns the asset question just in 1 minute. But
Mm,
just to clarify on the governance reform, public or private investment.
mm.
Firstly, what World Bank is supporting is the reform and not all the funding. World Bank is supporting for about 1,000 buses or so, but the city
Okay.
has many more buses, so they are
Yeah.
using the 1,000 as a demonstration. But the overall city gets benefited, not just for those 1,000 buses. So that is the VGF given by government to the corporation. Part of it World Bank, but only as a kickstarting program. But eventually, the city has committed to take it on its own budget gradually. So that, I mean, technically they haven't committed yet. It is still in process, but that is being structured, and hopefully in a month or two it should be in place. But the second question is who? So okay, now that we have a mandate that we want better service quality and we'll pay for it, who will deliver the service? So the thing with public capital is that public capital is limited. As a city or a state, you have several requirements to meet, right? So there are development needs, there are welfare needs. So public capital for any specific item is limited. What public should actually do is to safeguard somebody else's investment so that there is more investment coming into the public transport space. But people can make the case that a government loan would be 1 or 2% lower than a private person taking that loan. So it can be slightly more expensive, but then you get much higher volume of investment, so overall service volume increases. So that is one. The second thing is the cost of providing services is currently cheaper through a gross cost contract model, primarily because of the staff cost reduction. So, government staff, the average bus driver earns 30 to 40,000. The average. I mean, there are some more earning lesser or earning more in a government bus operator situation, because they start at a base level and there is an increment every year, and there are other benefits, welfare benefits that the government offers, and all of that. Whereas a private operator pays around 18 to 25,000 on average. That is because they just started. And in a government, once you get a driver job, you are there until 60 years. Whereas in private, you operate for 10, 15 years. And once you are becoming too expensive, they'll hire a junior guy to. The thing about driving is that you will get the same service quality, right, irrespective of the driver, or you train them enough to deliver a service quality to some extent. There is a experience effect for sure, but it's marginal.
Hmm.
So because of that reason, private is cheaper at this point. But that's because of the norms government only set. There is a labor welfare department which sets the base tariffs for a private skilled labor, unskilled labor. There are all these norms on the minimum daily wage labor rates, right?
Mm.
So government by design is making private staff cheaper than government staff, and that is not a bus operator's problem, that the skilled wage labor salary is lower in a private market than the government market, right? So eventually 5 10 years down the line we may have labor reforms, and that can be as competitive as a government salary or even better because they're taking a risk or whatever. So, but that's not a, as a bus operator, there are two legal choices. It's not like I'm illegally or there's some forced labor that I'm using to reduce my cost. There are two legal choices. Either hire staff in house, follows that norm, or hire staff on private and follow that norm. And as a bus operator, to me, the other one is cheaper at this point.
Yeah.
So I'll go with that option, which is legally valid. So
Yeah.
there are other issues like are they treating their labor? There are Motor Transport Workers Act issues where you
Yeah.
need to follow some norms. So those are still applicable to the private operator also. The bus corporation can't just wash their hands off just by handing over the bus to somebody else. So they still need to monitor all of this.
Fair
Are they
enough.
operating for more than 8 hours, 12 hours? Are they getting paid on time? Are they having insurance? All of that will still apply. So
Right. No, so
so because of
that's
this reason, so the private capital is technically more efficient at this
correct.
point. However, because the cities don't have the funding commitment, so those private operators are actually unable to raise finance in the market. So that is the key challenge I want to come to. There is one, the institutional reform of committing for viability gap funding. The
Mm.
second thing that is needed is to make sure that the private operator gets paid on time. So we are seeing in across cities that the payments are delayed by 1 month, 3 months because cities
That's
themselves
nothing. It
can't pay.
it has happened even worse apparently in many cases. Is that it just
Yeah,
goes
I'm
on
giving you
forever and
the average. Average
okay.
always takes care of the worst and the best, and so
Fair
together
enough.
it's at least 1 to 3 month delay, which means that the whoever is financing the private operator, they are unwilling to finance. So eventually, our systemic issues are impacting electric buses also. So we are now all happy about getting a lower cost because of procurement standardization.
Efficiencies. Yeah.
But to maintain this and scale it up, we need to address a systemic challenge, or as a via media, World Bank is also advancing this concept called a payment security mechanism, which
Mm.
already exists in other sectors. In the solar sector, there is some
Mm.
agency called SECI, Solar Energy Corporation of India,
Mm.
which will provide a payment guarantee at a national level. So if
Mm.
the city doesn't pay on time, you get paid by the national government, and the
Estimates.
national government collects it from the state
Right.
through their GST or other means. So
Correct.
some similar payment security mechanism at a national level will at least take care of the private operator short-term needs, and there is a larger systemic reform also needed.
There are two things that come up, Ravi. Is one is that the demand itself needs to not focus on replacement and things like that. It should focus on fulfilling this additional need that we have not serviced. Like I'll take Bangalore for example because we all live here. This 6,000 buses, 8,000 buses is no good, right? We need 12,000, 13,000, and cities like Beijing are at 30,000 is what people are telling me. But let's say you need to double that. New fleet needs to be electric. I heard that loud and clear from you, and I think we agree that use this opportunity to expand the fleet instead of trying to meddle around with what you already have, right? That can maybe also be partially replaced when some things is going on,
Mm.
but expanding the fleet is one thing. The second thing is this whole, its time has come to do two things like you said, right? You're asking for an RTC reform which will take time, which legally mandates capital allocation for procurement.
Capital as
Now
well as operational viability get both. Yeah,
some VGF has to be there, right?
yeah,
We maybe
yeah.
we should do another episode on why it costs and what are the recovery mechanisms that are available
Mm.
for buses. We should do a full episode on that one because I feel farebox alone is not going to cut it. There are social
Yeah.
obligations around this thing, and I want to explore that again. But coming back to just the strength of the local corporations, the state government, since there is no legal provision, they seem to think that if I want I will give, but I might not. right?
Yeah.
And with metro being the new kid on the block and all the money going there, bus seems to be taking a, uh, you know, being given second hand treatment. In my view, we can see that, you allocate 500 crore in the budget for all the transport corporation. How much is BMTC going to get in this? They can't even go back and buy those 500 buses that they left on the table,
Mm.
right? I don't want to drag this too long, but what I want you to tell me, concluding, is where do you see this e-bus revolution going? You said it is going to be a marriage. There will be ups and downs, but is 4,000 uptake going to even go to 8,000, 10,000, whatever it is? Is there another Fame 3 that is going to come up? No. How is this going to proceed forward? You said Mumbai is doing something on their own. Chennai is anyway trying to do something through this World Bank assistance program, small but minimal. But when all the support is left and walked away, the corporations by themselves just drop the ball and just sit down, right? It is not, the ball is not going forward unless there is a prodding by all of you guys. One CESL is sitting, one heavy industries is sitting, one World Bank is, there seems to be so much prodding required to get this momentum going on Newton's laws for these companies. Where do you see this going? Let's conclude with that. Where do you see this going? Is it going to go, not go? People need to keep prodding. Who are those people who need to keep prodding this?
See, there is a lot of prodding and kicking around needed to advance the mandate for increasing the fleet size and then the financial reforms needed. So there is no question of getting away from that. That is definitely needed. And there are small steps taken here and there, but there's still not enough momentum. So how to get that momentum, we still don't know because we have been banging our heads around just to figure that out. We don't. Nobody has the answer at this point, but there are people trying to make efforts at a national level, city, state level. But for the replacement needs, for sure, the momentum has been achieved. Like the free flow Newton law things, and there is momentum unless somebody stops on the other side. So there is momentum. After that 5,545 that I discussed earlier, even the FAME 2 subsidy is exhausted by then. So the next round, CESL has come up with a 6465 tender again. So
Mhm.
which is without subsidy, and those rates were also discovered, and even without subsidy, the cost discovered. I mean, of course, it is 25% more expensive than with subsidy, but still, if you compare that with the diesel CNG cost, it is still cheaper than that. So now, so even without subsidy, there is a uptake. So CSL has been going on and on. After that second round, now they have called for a third round of demand. They are aggregating demand. So at least at a national level, there is a momentum set up that that this is a business model to go ahead. First, second, there are city level efforts also. Like Mumbai has already gone ahead and procured 2,100 buses parallelly using similar procurement specs as CESL, and they have another 700 double decker buses also. Chennai is going ahead with its own 1,000 buses. So, and Delhi, I mean Hyderabad only 2 3 days back issued a 550 bus contract, electric buses tender on its own separately. So at least the electric momentum, it's not a revolution. Revolution means that there is somebody ruler and there is oppressed and you are revolting against electric, revolting against diesel. So I think it's not a revolution anymore. It is the practice now, at least in urban context. The revolution needs to happen in the rural intercity market where the KSRTC, TSRTC, APSRTC kind of organizations also pick up the electric bus momentum. So that there some prodding is still needed to on the technology side to build the technology as well as the cities. So yeah.
Right. That's a very well said one. It is not a revolution anymore. It is a juggernaut, which needs to,
Mm.
it's a rolling stone and it needs to
Mm.
not sit down and gather any moss right now. It needs to just keep moving. And I think, like you said, there is a lot more prodding left. But let's hope we keep prodding for a few more years till this thing goes on and we keep at it and get it to be a momentum where even if there is a force from the opposing side, it can't be stopped. Thank you very much, Ravi, for getting on this. I want to come back with you on more details. Let's do another one soon on some more nitty gritties. I want people to know more about all these things. It's never really explained in a nice way that they can, a layman can understand a lot of these things. So let's come back and do this. Thank you very much for getting on this podcast, Ravi. Thanks a lot.
Sure, my pleasure. I mean, I'm always available to talk about buses. That is what I do all the time. So So very excited to be here.